Syndicated Source Material.
So, Syndicated Source Material coming back at you here. This is the 5th episode that we aired on the Radulich In Broadcasting Network, back on Blogtalk Radio. I did another live episode here. Our good friend Gavin Napier actually called in and was my second guest for the podcast. We discussed Freddie versus Jason versus Ash. The episode aired in 2014, right around Halloween, so it was October, and it was the right time for it. Gavin and I had plans to every Halloween get together, or at least every October, and get together and discuss some type of horror-related comic book series. Did that for about, I think 3 or 4 years straight, and then unfortunately, as things do in the podcast world, other priorities took place, and we kind of fell off of that tradition. But here is the first entry to that horror-centric source material. The original airtime for this was about an hour and 38 minutes. After edit, got in there, and I cleaned things up a good bit, and we're talking a little bit more than an hour right now, so that's good. There is a point in here where you actually hear my audio completely changes to where I'm talking on a regular headset mic. Blogtalk was known for its problems that could just immediately spring up at a moment's notice. And while I was talking with Gavin, it dropped me. So even though I was hosting the show, I had to call back in via phone because my audio completely left and I was hosting the show. So I had to call back in and show up as a guest on the show. So that's why my audio is different, because I'm calling through a phone. But anyway, it was a good time. Got to hang out with Gavin. Gavin does come back to the Source Material podcast quite a bit. But like I said, this is his first appearance. So here we go. Ladies and gentlemen, Freddie versus Jason versus Ash.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Source Material. My name is Jesse Starcher. I'm your host tonight on our second live show. I'm just going to go ahead and put this out there right now. I may have watched maybe one or two movies Friday the 13th, because I'm a big chicken. And I was absolutely horrified when I remember catching. I think I caught like maybe a couple scenes or something like that of, I think it was like the second or third one. And man, I just couldn't hack it. I couldn't hack it. No pun intended. But anyway, yeah, Friday the 13th. Tonight, we're going to venture into a 6-issue series that came out in 2007, 2008. It's based off of a movie that came out, I think it was in 2003 or 2004, Freddy versus Jason. All right. Now, Freddy, we'll get into who Freddy is if you're not familiar, but Jason Vorhees is your primary villain in the Friday the 13th series. I'm gonna kind of address the basics on those guys. But the name of this series is Freddy versus Jason versus Ash. Now, Freddy is alluding to Freddy Kreuger. Now, if you had a chance to see the Freddy versus Jason movie, or if you're pretty familiar with the horror genre, you probably know who Freddy Kreuger is. He is the burnt up dream monster that comes to you in your dreams and has the glove with the knives on the tips of his fingers. Quite a franchise that came out there in the 80s. We had, in the movie, we had Freddy versus Jason, okay? For years, I mean, we're talking since the 80s, early 80s, people had been talking about how great it would be to see Freddy Kreuger versus Jason on the big screen. They did it, okay? So the movie happened. Let's switch gears and talk about another film franchise, the Evil Dead film franchise. Main protagonist in there was a guy by the name of Ashley J. Williams, Ash for short. That particular franchise I wasn't too familiar with until I saw the preview for Army of Darkness. That caught my attention. I think I rented the movie. Now, this is, again, I was kind of, I think I was like maybe 13 or 14. I was kind of getting in, or able to stomach some horror movies. Okay, and I certainly wouldn't go into some of the really gory stuff that was out there. I couldn't stomach the gore, but Army of Darkness was a movie that wasn't extremely gory. You can't say that too much about their predecessors, Evil Dead 1 and Evil Dead 2, but Army of Darkness had some humor in it, and that made it all the more palatable. The main hero, Ash, who made his way into the Deadite dimension and had to go on a quest for the Necronomicon in order for him to get back to his own time or his own. I think, if I remember correctly, he did get sucked back in time and had to get the Necronomicon in order to come back. But anyway, so we know who Freddie is, we know who Jason is, and now we know who Ash is. And in 2007, they put these guys together into a comic book, and we have Freddie versus Jason versus Ash. Let me just tell you why I picked the book. Number one, I've been wanting to read it, obviously. That'll be a standard answer or standard reason as to why I pick anything is because I want to read it. But also, we're talking, it's October. Today's October 20th, and Halloween is not too far. So I figured, you know what, Freddie versus Jason versus Ash. Let's read it and see what happens. That's kind of why I picked the book. Like I said, it started in 2007, ran through March of 2008. The publisher of the book, Wildstorm, if you're familiar with Wildstorm Comics, they were fronted by Jim, or I think they're still headed by Jim Lee. I don't know. I know Jim Lee is main part of DC now, so in 2008, I don't know if that's what was going on or not, but I could tell you right now, flipping through the book, his face is in the back of every single freaking issue. So I know Jim Lee they're at least showing you the face of Jim Lee and maybe the primary backer of Wildstorm Comics, and we also have Dynamite as a publisher. So they came together and created this comic book. Your creative team is a writer by the name of James Kuhoric, Kuhoric. Can't say that that's a name that really jumps off the page to me. And the artist is Jason Craig. It's another person that I wish I could say I knew a lot of his work. But there's your creative team. Let me just go ahead and give you guys, a word up front. What we're going to do is we're going to cover this 6-issue series. I'm going to give you a spoiler warning. Obviously, if you want to read the book and you don't want to hear me talk about it, which absolutely understandable, go pick it up. See if you can find it. I don't know if it's trade or not, but you might be able to find it in trade. And be prepared because there is going to be. We're talking about two of the main slasher villains of our era. So there's going to be a lot of mature gore. I'll just give you a mature reader warning. How's that? We're going to be there. We're going to be talking blood. We're going to be talking gore. Just be prepared. Again, this is going to be one of those. I'm going to describe some stuff that happens in some of these comics, and it's not going to paint a pretty picture for any kids that are in the car or in the room while you're listening. So, all right. That's pretty much the intro there, so let's go ahead and get into issue number 1. Like I said, it's important to remember that the movie Freddy vs. Jason happened, okay, because this is actually based off of a treatment that they were proposing for another movie. The movie apparently could not get made, so Freddy vs. Jason vs. Ash was brought to the comic book realm. The events in this book take place 5 years after the movie Freddy vs. Jason, and immediately in the first issue, what they want to do is. What I wanted to see was how are they going to bring these guys together? I was already aware Freddie and Jason knew each other. They had a knockdown, drag-out fight in the movie. But now we're going to introduce Ash, and that's what I wanted to see how they were going to do. And that's, of course, what the first issue is going to do is bring to you how Ash, Army of Darkness, Evil Dead, gets put into the book. So we're going to, like I said, 5 years after the events of Freddy vs. Jason, the two main characters that were able to survive the onslaught of those two guys in the movie, Will and Laurie, are still alive. Laurie has she's got some kind of a feeling that something isn't put to rest back at Crystal Lake. So, like the smart people they are, I think Will is actually like, I don't know why the hell you're going back here, but she convinces him to go back to Crystal Lake. And in this first issue, within, 3 or 4 pages, Will and Laurie, we'll just say, meet their doom by the hands of Jason. Will I think he has maybe like 3 or 4 panels, and he's strung up hanging from the rafters. Laurie gets a machete straight to the skull. She tries to do some fighting. As a matter of fact, she catches Jason in the back with this buzzsaw or something, rips his whole back open. But, of course, Jason is a relentless monster. To describe Jason Vorhees to you, Jason Vorhees, hockey mask wearing, close to 7 feet tall, hulking zombie monster. That's the best way I can describe it. And the reason why we call him, the reason I liken him to a zombie is, they've tried to kill this guy over and over and over. And, no matter what you do to this dude, he just keeps coming and coming. And he keeps He'll die, get resurrected. He'll get, crap shot off of him. He'll get, limbs. He'll get blown to pieces. The guy, he's just relentless. And so he's back at Crystal Lake, and he's again trying to, taking his vengeance out upon the residents of Crystal Lake. I want to jump into the whole vengeance part of things. Jason Vorhees was drowned as a young kid. Some camp counselors, if you've never watched the first movie, I'm going to give you the brief gist of it. These, the camp counselors were neglectful. He drowned as a kid. He comes back to life, we'll just put it that way, wreaks havoc among the camp counselors and the camp and hacks and slashes everybody up, okay? Now he's still haunting, we'll just say, Crystal Lake. All right, so our main characters that survived Freddy versus Jason are now dead. Jason's just bringing these bodies back to this shed and just kind of hanging them up there. But what we see in the shed also is a burnt up head of Freddy Kreuger laying there on a table. And then we see that Freddy's actually still in Jason's mind. Now in the movie, that was the way, Freddy could get upper hand. Freddy's not a very big guy. He's just, he's like your 160-pound uncle who has a glove with knives on him. So he's not a big dude. But the only way he could get the upper hand is go into Jason's mind and Jason's dreams, kind of take over there, because he's the master of the dream world. So Freddy's still in Jason's head, and he actually finds out that the Necronomicon, powerful book, is buried under Jason Voorhees' old house. So he puts Jason Vorhees on a mission and says, hey, look, if you want me out of your head, then all you need to do is find the Necronomicon, get me that book, and we will be, I'll be out of here. So that's how they set up issue, the Freddy and Jason in issue 1. Freddy's still hanging out in Jason's head. We're also treated in this first issue to, there's a new building, a new department store being put up in Crystal Lake, which, by the way, Crystal Lake is now being changed to the name of Forest Green, just to kind of put that out there. But they're putting up a super mega ultra S-Mart. Now, if anybody is familiar with the Army of Darkness, Ash, in that movie, he was a housewares or retail clerk at this store called the S-Mart, Shop S-Mart. So they're putting up this super mega ultra S-Mart, and we meet a few people there at the S-Mart. There's a girl by the name of Carrie. She's a pretty prominent figure throughout the series, and there's a few other guys that are kind of introduced. They're kind of slackers. They need to bring in a domestic engineer, a housewares domestic engineer, to kind of set this store straight. And of course, in order to get this store on its feet, they bring in the one, the only Ashley J. Williams. Last panel of issue 1 is Ash getting out of his car, walking toward the S-Mart. Behind him, covered by the snow-covered trees, is a Jason Voorhees, clearly looking towards the S-Mart and watching Ash walk in. So there we go. That's the end of issue 1. A great way to kind of bring you back and bring in some of the elements from the movie Freddy vs. Jason, kind of pick up where they left off, and definitely close some chapters with the two main characters. A good start. Good way to get it off of the ground. So now we got to go into issue 2. So we pretty much pick up right where we left off, and that's where Jason is walking toward the S-Mart. And right off the bat, there's these 3 ladies out front, and Jason just grabs a hold of one of them and rips them in half. And the other 2, he grabs a hold of them and just smashes their faces together. So it's pretty gruesome. We can say that for sure. Jason just makes his way out of there. We also find out that Ash is after the book also. One of the reasons I think it's his never-ending quest is to get this Necronomicon and basically destroy it if he can. He's also keeping an eye out for the book, but he's helping these people out at the S-Mart to get him back up on his feet. We also see that Ash has a mechanical hand. One of the things that happened in the Army of, I think it was Evil Dead, as a matter of fact, he had to chop his hand off. The Army of Darkness, he replaced his hand with a chainsaw. One of the iconic things that I can remember from that movie is that chainsaw hand. But he's also got a mechanical. He apparently has some kind of mechanical hand. Don't ask me the details on how he got it or whatever, but it probably took place in some other comic books or whatever. When he gets there, he does a recap of what happened to him, an army of darkness with some of the people there at the S-Mart. And, of course, the slacker kids that are working there, they don't believe him. They think he's crazy. At one point, Ash is able to make the determination because this murder happened outside in the parking lot where those chicks got killed. And they're yelling, Jason, Jason, it was Jason. And, the people in the S-Mart proceed to tell Ash about who Jason Vorhees is. And he makes the assumption, that sounds an awful lot like a Deadite to me. So he's, his goal is now to get to Jason Voorhees' house and see if maybe there's a connection here. There's a point where he kind of says that he looks at the one girl that's telling him the story. I think it's Carrie that's telling him the story, and says, that's got Deadite written all over it, baby. So he's now decided, okay, he's going to go toward Jason Voorhees' house. One of the last things I'd ever do. He's going to go look for the Necronomicon there. Again, we kind of flash to where Freddy Kreuger is in Jason's mind, and he's continually saying, okay, you need to go get the Necronomicon. You need to go back to your house, get the Necronomicon. So it's there, apparently. So he's telling him, go get the Necronomicon, and that he says, if you do this for me, I'll make you smarter. One of the key elements of Jason Voorhees, okay, the machete, that's a big thing. But another thing is the fact that he uses the machete to hack and slash his way through. He doesn't talk. He's a silent, doesn't say anything. On the opposite side of the spectrum, you have Freddy Kreuger, who does nothing but talk. And that's a really cool contrast. But Freddy tells Jason, look, if you do this for me, I'll give you some more brain cells. I'll make you a little bit smarter. So Jason continues on his quest to go back to his house and get the Necronomicon. Kills a few carolers on the way. Mind you, the setting here, it's Crystal Lake is snowed over. It's snowed over and frozen solid, by the way. The lake is frozen. So it's happening around Christmas time. I think the book came out in November of 2007, so hence the setting. But there's he kills a few carolers, and it's brutal. He basically grabs a do not enter sign and proceeds to chop them in half. I mean, it's messed up. Now we go back to Ash, who's decided to follow some teenagers up to the Voorhees mansion. He finds out that that's where these guys are going because apparently the Voorhees mansion is slated to be demolished. Of course, the teenagers are going there to do what teenagers do. Now, there's some elements in this book that are classic slasher film stuff. One of those is the kids heading out and doing what the teenagers do, the rated R stuff that teenagers do. So Ash ends up following them, and Carrie, the girl from the S-Mart, ends up following Ash at the same time. Of course, plotting his way back to his homestead is Jason Voorhees. Ash is able to make his way into the basement and actually finds the Necronomicon just buried, like inches underneath the earth. Now, upstairs, Jason makes his presence known and shows up in the middle of their escapade, we'll call them, proceeds to just start, slashing them up and down in half. Limbs are flying everywhere. We get to a point where Ash is like, oh, what's going on up there? He proceeds to go up. We have a face-off between Jason Voorhees and Ash. Ash decides, okay, hey, look, I don't think Ash is in for a fight, so he basically gets the hell out of Dodge, jumps in the car, and was able to save one girl in the process. And they get in the car, he's turning the car, and the last panel is Jason Voorhees with his machete plodding toward the car, slowly and surely. And up in the top right-hand corner, above him, you see. You could hear, or you could see Ash is trying to frantically start the car, and that's how they end issue 2. So there's your cliffhanger for issue 2. Again, like I said, it introduced that classic slasher flick, especially in the Friday the 13th movies, where the kids or the teenagers go to get it on, and Jason shows up and ruins their fun. And man, did he ruin. There's some stuff that happened to some of them kids. It's just horrible. Well, give me a moment here. I think I've got a caller. Give me just a second. All right. Gavin, I've made it through issue 2 here, explaining to the people what has gone on. This is Gavin Napier of the Casual Heroes. He agreed to come on here and talk a little bit about Freddie versus Jason versus Ash, and I'm greatly in debt, and I appreciate you coming on, man. I know you're an Army of Darkness Ash fan for sure, correct?
Yep, absolutely.
Now, are you a big fan of the other two? Because I've never really seen you talk about them a whole lot, but is that something that...
I'm a fan of horror movies in general. I was never a big fan of Freddie. I really liked the first Nightmare on Elm Street because it was more of a true horror movie. The second Nightmare on Elm Street was tolerable, not great, not awful, but definitely watchable. After we hit Nightmare on Elm Street 3, 4, 5, so on, I felt like Freddie became more of a comedy character than a true horror figure, and he sort of lost his appeal for me. I will say that I thought Wes Craven's New Nightmare was a pretty clever reinvention of the franchise, but they didn't follow up on it with anything. So for me, my appreciation for Freddie sort of goes with Nightmare on Elm Street 1 to New Nightmare, and then Freddie versus Jason. That's sort of it for me. Jason, to me, was always kind of goofy fun. It was about seeing what inventive ways he could come up with to kill somebody. Probably my favorite slasher movie death come from Friday the 13th movies. The harpoon gun in Friday the 13th Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan. I want to say Part 6, when he picks up the sleeping bag and beats the girl inside to death against the tree like he's beating laundry or beating out a rug. When he presses the face into the side of the hamper and you can see the imprint of the face come through the sheet metal. Yeah, I always liked the Friday the 13th movies for that reason. It wasn't that I necessarily found Jason scary or was a big fan of the movies. It was about seeing how he was going to kill people. For me, my favorite of the horror franchises has always been Halloween. It's always been Michael Myers. But Michael Myers doesn't really fit into what they're doing here with Freddy versus Jason and Freddy versus Jason versus Ash. Probably my second favorite would be the good Hellraiser movies. And Long Road to Ruin covered the Hellraiser franchise, did so very well. And they split it pretty well between the good Hellraiser movies and the bad Hellraiser movies. If you're so inclined, if you're a fan of Pinhead and the rest of the gang, go check those out on Radulich In Broadcasting Network from when they did that a few months ago. But for Freddie, Jason, and Ash is far and away my favorite character of the three. A lot of that has to do with the way he's played by the one and only Bruce Campbell. It's impossible for me to read these comic books and read Ash's dialogue, not hear Bruce Campbell's voice, and envision the slapstick physicality that he brings to the role of Ash with everything. So that's sort of where I am with this book.
You know, I just covered issue 2, and one of the things that they did such a great job. One thing that I could tell for a reader like me, and maybe you can expound on this a little bit since you're more familiar with the characters, is the fact that their aim, the guys that wrote this, or the guy that wrote this, to get these characters right. I think they did a decent job. Would you agree?
Yeah. Freddie is the antagonist. He's the guy that pushes everybody's buttons and has nefarious goals. Jason is very much the sympathetic character because he's a mindless child that's pretty much having a tantrum on the world, and it results in horrific deaths. And then, out of nowhere, in this supernatural realm, they weave in the tale of the Necronomicon and Ashley Williams and what Bruce Campbell brings to the mix. And that's sort of our knight in shining armor with a bit of buffoonery mixed in. I think they definitely got the characters pitched perfect for this series.
Just like you said, with trying to read Ash's dialogue, hail to the king, baby, and it's just it's Bruce Campbell all the way. When you watched, going back to the Evil Dead series, Army of Darkness, were you one of the ones that watched Evil Dead first and then proceeded to number 2 and then watched Army of Darkness, or did you I watched Army of Darkness, and then I went back and grabbed the other two. Was that something that you did, or were you following that series as it came out?
Well, I was a little young to follow it as it came out, but where I grew up in Logan, West Virginia, there was a video rental store called the Emporium, and the guy that ran it was a dirty middle-aged man that knew no boundaries when it came to corrupting the lives of children. One of my preferred methods as we'll say junior high student, probably in that 11 to 14 age range, and it was so much easier to do in the late 80s and early 90s. One of my preferred methods for picking out a movie to watch or a movie to rent was the cover art, because there was no internet to go see what the movie was about. There was no way to look up reviews. And so it was sort of blind luck whenever you picked something out and it was actually good. The cover art for Evil Dead 2 is very striking. It's a skull and it's bleached white. It's a bleached white skull with two fully formed eyeballs staring at you at an angle from a black box. So it's a very striking image. I remember seeing that and thinking, might be a little much to sit up and watch by myself in the middle of the night. And right next to it was Army of Darkness. Army of Darkness looked like a completely different concept than Evil Dead. It looked like almost a warped Conan the Barbarian based on the cover art.
Yeah.
And I remember grabbing Army of Darkness, and Gus, the guy that ran the Emporium, said, whoa. He said, you can't watch that until you watch the other two.
Oh.
And I'm looking at the box, and I'm not seeing Army of Darkness 3, so I'm thinking, well, wait a minute, what are the other two? And he didn't even have Evil Dead for rent. He gave me Evil Dead out of his personal collection to watch.
Oh my goodness.
And then I rented Evil Dead 2 and Army of Darkness, and I watched all three over the course of a weekend and absolutely fell in love with the character of Ash, because you see him go from this petrified, terrified, just stumbling all over himself, no idea what's going on character in the original Evil Dead, to having sort of a psychotic break in Evil Dead 2, to embracing his role as the savior of all humanity in Army of Darkness. And so my introduction literally was to all three movies over the course of one weekend.
You had somebody watching out for you. That old guy, that's pretty funny. Oh, shoot. Well, okay, let's now I know you did, I think I plugged it here. I know you did Long Road to Ruin on the Army of Darkness and the Evil Dead movies, correct?
Yes.
Yes, okay. So, listeners, if you get a chance, go back and listen to Gavin, and I think Mark was on that show with you. I don't know if anybody else joined in, but Long Road to Ruin.
Sean Comer joined us on that one.
Very good. So go back, check it out, grab it, and listen up if you'd like to hear about it. Now, let's switch gears. We'll go to Freddie versus Jason versus Ash. Now, I know you just reread the series there recently. Like I said, I'm up to issue. We got issue 1, issue 2. I just kind of covered those. Did a little recap. Was there anything specific that you wanted to say on those? Anything that stood out to you on those first two issues, or?
I just remember when I bought the series, I remember thinking issue 1 was very dialogue heavy. It was not what I was expecting, but it did a really good job of setting up the premise of what was going on. It's important to note that a lot of the concept for this book and a lot of what plays out in this book comes from an unfinished screenplay of a movie that we were supposed to get. This very much, through the first two acts, follows what the screenplay was supposed to be for the movie by the same name, Freddy versus Jason versus Ash. The reason that movie never got made is because when they sat down with all of the principal parties involved, Bruce Campbell said, Ash has to win. And everybody kind of looked at him, and he just shrugged his shoulders and said, what? And they said, it's a regular guy going up against a demonic force and a supernatural killing machine. To which Bruce said, exactly. If Freddy dies, he just comes back. If Jason dies, he just comes back. If Ash dies, he's just dead.
Mm-hmm.
And so Bruce Campbell was a stickler for the idea that Ash had to come out on top. And I understand his reasoning behind it. It makes perfect sense. But they didn't agree with his perspective on things. I don't know what the ending was supposed to be. But they did not agree with the thought process that Ash was supposed to win the fight because he was immortal and his character had to survive for future installments. So that's why we never got the movie. But the book is based very much on what we were supposed to get in the movie. When you read it, it reads like the movie would begin. It reads like the first act of a movie would play out. And that's very intentional on the part of the creative team for this book.
Well, you look at the Freddy versus Jason movie, you see that the intent at the end of that movie was so that you didn't know that there was a clear winner. They specifically made it so that there wasn't a clear winner. And I would think that, if they're going to do a sequel, I would do the same thing. I would, at the end, I certainly would not kill Ash off. There's no way in hell I would do that.
No.
There's no way, because you're pretty much ending the franchise at that point in time. I mean, you might be able to write it somehow, but I wouldn't agree with that in any way. Freddy and Jason, not unstoppable. They've got freaking more than 5 movies behind them, so we definitely don't want to kill one of them off either. Yeah, definitely interesting fact there. I mean, they couldn't come together. Now, are there still rumblings that it may actually happen at some point, or is it totally off the table?
I think it's totally off the table, because I think once things sort of broke down with Bruce Campbell and the Ash character, the next concept that they had in mind was Freddy versus Jason, and then somehow incorporating the Hellraiser franchise into it, and having Pinhead and his crew be involved somehow.
Wow.
So they sort of moved away from the Army of Darkness franchise, which is fine with me, because it appears, and I promise, folks, we'll get back to the comics here shortly, but this is just too fascinating for me. It appears that over the next couple of years, we're going to get a sequel to the reboot of the Evil Dead franchise that came out a couple of years ago. We're going to get an Army of Darkness 2 featuring Bruce Campbell, and then those two franchises are going to merge with sort of the ultimate Evil Dead Army of Darkness movie featuring Bruce Campbell's generation and the new generation of Evil Dead.
If they can pull this off, I mean, do you think it's going to be an easy feat for them to do something like that?
I don't think it'll be easy, but I trust Sam Raimi to get it done.
I hear you, for sure. I would love to see something like that. When you start throwing crazy, science fiction kind of stuff into horror movies like that, and so two universes can collide. That's what this is. I don't know if I've mentioned this before on any podcast or not, but the first ever horror movie that I ever went to go see in a theater was with my wife, and I went and watched Freddy versus Jason. Now, I was like 2003, so I would have been 25 at the time. That's not saying a whole lot. I should have had like 7 years of horror movies at the theater under my belt, but I had to go with my wife too, and that was the first one. It was actually down in Bluefield, West Virginia, when we lived down there for 9 months. We went to the theater, and I was like, okay, I'm definitely into watching Freddy versus Jason, because it's just going to be a great concept to watch these two guys go at it. And I was able to handle the gore. I was able to be a man. We'll just put it that way. And I stuck it out and watched it. Enjoyed every minute of it. And then I found out that I believe a fellow alum of mine, I graduated from OU, ended up directing it. Great. I enjoyed the movie. First ever horror movie I ever went to see. But yeah, I love the fact that they brought those two together. So I'm definitely interested in if they do it with the Evil Dead stuff. I still haven't watched the new Evil Dead one either. I've wanted to. I just haven't watched the new reboot. I've heard you guys talk about it, I think. Can you give us? Is it something that I should watch?
Yeah, it's pretty faithful to the original. Sam Raimi and Bruce Campbell both visited the set and spoke with the director and the screenplay writer, and they gave it their blessing. They said, these guys are doing their own thing, but they're staying faithful to the spirit of the franchise. They were impressed with what was going on. That was enough for me. Once Sam Raimi and Bruce Campbell said this is okay, I said, okay, I'll check it out. It's nothing groundbreaking. Don't go into it thinking they're going to reinvent the genre or anything like that. It's just, It really is a retelling of the original Evil Dead, and the idea behind the merger of the franchises is Bruce Campbell's character Ash keeps getting kicked around the multiverse by the Necronomicon to fight the Evil Dead wherever they may be. He finally gets kicked back into our universe, modern day. Does he put an end to it once and for all? I don't know what the story is, but that's the idea.
Awesome. All right, well, we'll kick back here. We'll get back to issue 3. Now, where we just left off, issue 2, Ash and Carrie, I believe, Ash and the girl he rescued from the mansion are in the car trying to start the car, and Jason is just, on his way. And that's probably the same sound the car was making as Ash was trying to start it. But all right, so issue 3 picks up exactly where we left off, and they can't get the car started, so they get the hell out of the car and take off. Carrie, the girl from the S-Mart, followed Ash up there and is able to provide an escape for Ash and the girl he rescued. And they have the Necronomicon. They were able to find it in the basement of Jason Voorhees' mansion. And they take the Voorhees mansion, I guess I should say. And they take off and take back off to the S-Mart. Now, of course, Freddie is in Jason's head. Go get the Necronomicon. Go get the Necronomicon. You want to get me out of your skull? Go get the Necronomicon. So Jason, shortly thereafter, shows up at the S-Mart. There are some kills that I'll tell you right now. I'll just give you one of my favorite kills is the supervisor with the clipboard, where he proceeds to take that clipboard and shove it in his jaw, and basically unhinging his jaw from his skull. Oh, and of course, the other one I sent to you where he had picked up this girl. He just picks her up off the ground and proceeds to impale her on those I don't know what you call them, the retail spokes that hold the product on the wall, and just all the little spokes start going through her. That was insane. We get our fight between Ash and Jason. Jason kind of gets the better of him. I think Ash is able to get a hold of a chainsaw. Well, at first he uses a regular chainsaw. Jason just pretty much crushes the freaking engine of the chainsaw, and we lose our chainsaw. Well, this is Ash's iconic weapon. And so Jason actually ends up getting the Necronomicon from the girl there and takes off heading back toward the mansion. He leaves. I don't know if he's going back toward the mansion. He's leaving to go back to wherever he came from. And he proceeds to give Freddie the book. Freddie now has the Necronomicon, and we get those iconic words. Gavin, please.
Klaatu, Verata, Nikto.
There we go.
Or in the words of Ashley Williams, Klaatu, Verata, Nichols. I said the words, okay?
Freddie's finally able to get out of Jason's head after uttering the iconic words. And so now Freddie's loose and he's free. Now Ash and Carrie and ragtag band of slacker friends start devising a plan to go back and get the book. And of course, Ash is planning on grabbing the book and sending Jason back to the it's the Deadite dimension. Is that a correct term for it?
Yeah, that's the plan, is to get Jason to a world of Deadites where he can just go on a rampage and he'll be slaughtering something worth slaughtering.
There you go. So they're devising this plan. I think they are in some type of a house. Well, Ash ends up dozing off. Guess, of course, who shows up in his dreams? None other than the Dream Master himself, Freddy Kreuger. And I think that's where we leave the end of issue 3.
I want to let you know that you are correct. Freddy vs. Jason was directed by an OU grad. His name was Ronnie Yu.
Thank you. I knew couldn't remember his name.
So you were correct on that. Second thing is, I think they did an excellent job in issue 3 here of putting our hero in peril. I think they did an excellent job of giving Ash odds to overcome, and I don't know how well it would have translated on the screen, but at least reading it in comic book form, I think it came across pretty well. Ash holds his own with Jason, comes up a little short, and we see what appears to be Freddy's master plan coming to fruition. He has this book that makes him all-powerful, and we close with Freddy in Ash's head. And so there's a sense of danger for the hero, and we have a legitimate antagonist taking on a protagonist, and there are odds to be overcome over the next half of this series.
This is Ash's first meeting with Freddy, basically right at the end of this book, even though he just kind of falls asleep and starts having a nightmare. I don't know if Freddy shows up. You can see Freddy hovering over him, but this is the first time Ash is even aware of who the heck Freddy is, correct?
Correct. He's had his one-on-one encounter with Jason, but this is his introduction to Freddy Kreuger.
Okay. All right. So issue 4, Freddie's now in Ash's dreams, and Ash, I think, assumes that Freddie's a Deadite in here also. I mean, he certainly looks like one. Well, we could definitely say that. For some reason, this kind of confused me, but I think I figured it out why. He tells Ash that he wants him and his group of ragtag slackers or whatever to go get the Necronomicon. So I'm sitting there thinking, well, why the hell does he need them to go get it? What I kind of figured out was the fact that I think he was planning on sending them to go basically on a crash course with Jason. That's the only thing I could think of, is that he was going to put Ash on a course to go find Jason or go get Jason, because the last thing Ash knew was that Jason had the book. I don't think Ash knows that Freddie has the Necronomicon at this point in time. He's sending Ash to go find Jason, and I imagine Freddie's just like, well, Jason will take care of him. Now, at one point, one of the group there gets killed by a Freddie, by basically a dream that Freddie's in. It was a dodgeball sequence or something where the kid gets crushed by dodgeballs, which that's unfortunate. I mean, the kid's just laying there, and they're watching him get crushed to death, basically in the real world. They don't know what the hell's going on. The dream sequence is some dodgeballs come in there and just basically crush the guy. There's a point in this book where they're gathering supplies and they're going to go after Jason. Well, Ash is missing that iconic weapon that he always has on his hand, his trusty rusty chainsaw, and he ends up getting something called chain lightning. It was this huge, this huge chainsaw that he ends up connecting to his arm. Of course, now he's got chain lightning and he's on his way to go take care of Jason. I think I might have missed the point where Freddie made a pact with Jason saying, hey, if you get me the Necronomicon, I'll make you a little bit smarter. Well, Jason came through on that end of the deal, and Freddie gave Jason a few more brain cells, I guess you would say. He made him a little bit smarter. And it gets important because in this issue, a couple of the guys set this like bomb. After they find Jason and they're getting ready to go on the attack, they plant this bomb and they just kind of lay it out there. And Jason kind of walks over to it. He's about to bend down and pick it up when he realizes that, oh, wait a second, it's a trap. So right there you kind of see where he's supposedly gotten smarter, and he turns around and starts heading toward the cars. And I think he ends up killing a couple more of the slackers from S-Mart. Our hero Ash and Carrie, of course, are okay. Freddie has read the Necronomicon at this point. He starts flashing his newfound power by manipulating the outside world. He's now got this power to where not only can he influence the dream world, he's already had that, but now he can influence what he calls the waking world. And he starts changing stuff and making the outside world into his nightmarescape. As he starts doing this actually gets Jason's attention, and Jason turns around and starts heading back for Freddie. And Freddie takes care of him by making all the souls that Jason has killed come up from the ground as deadites and attack Jason. And that's pretty much where we end issue 4, is Jason just kind of laying there getting his ass handed to him by a bunch of previous people that he had killed. And that's the end of issue 4. Got anything to add there, Gavin?
Yeah, I thought this was a really strong issue. If you think of this in terms of professional wrestling, and it's hard for me not to think of everything in terms of professional wrestling, especially when you put the word versus in the title of a book. I'm going to think of it that way. This is the heel exerting dominance. This is Freddie manipulating people and putting them where he wants them to be. And, Jason makes a deal with the devil and he gets what he wants out of it. But at the same time, there's a price to pay for dealing with the devil. Ash looks to be in a little bit better position than he was at the end of issue 3. He's still around. He's still kicking. He managed to survive Freddie's intrusion into his dreams, but still doesn't have the upper hand. It's still Freddie's ballgame. So, again, one of the issues that I think really plays out well if you look at it from a movie perspective. This is an issue that would progress, sort of that middle, fast-paced 15 to 20 minutes of a movie that you want to see all of the kills in, that you want to get all the blood and guts in before you head to the very climax of the movie. Agreed.
And one thing that permeates throughout this, and the manipulation of that Freddy Kreuger uses on, especially in this particular issue where he's like, okay, he manipulates Ash to go after Jason, and of course he's manipulating Jason at the beginning. That you can see that in Freddy Kreuger's character, and throughout most of this book. We'll go to issue 5 there. We're going to pick up where Freddie and Jason are basically battling. There's a battle sequence there between Freddie and Jason. Of course, while this is all going on, our buddy Ash, he's able to grab the Necronomicon and take off. Freddie is able to realize this. He ends up setting the nightmare escape that he's able to do. He starts like popping these possessed trees up. Now, I don't know if this was the possessed tree. That's something from the Evil Dead movies, right?
Yeah, they found a way to work in all of the trademarks for all three guys.
That's what I thought.
Freddie and the creative kills and taunting people and manipulating them in the dream world. Jason with butchering people in just the most brutal, blunt force ways possible. They incorporated Jason's mom. With Ash, you see the Necronomicon, you get the big chainsaw, you get the possessed tree. Yeah, that's sort of a trademark of the Evil Dead series.
Gotcha. So he's able to escape by using chain lightning and taking out some of those trees. He finds, as Ash is trying to get out of there, he ends up finding two of the slacker friends that got hacked up by Jason earlier. He finds them laying on the ground, and you kind of get that moment where he I don't want to say doubts himself, but he's upset with the fact that he can't save everybody, and you get that hero motivation. You can see that's in Ash, that he wants. It's not all about running around and hail to the king. He's got heroic motives here. He's trying to stop all this death and destruction, and he believes the Necronomicon as being, the source of all that. Okay, where are we at here? Ash and Carrie, they basically are able to get to a safe place, and this is where we kind of get a little bit of history here. Now, as to whether this holds up, but definitely for this series, it ties in so great, where they grab the Necronomicon and they open it up, and they see somewhat of a pictorial history of what has occurred. And one of those things that have occurred was Pamela Voorhees, which, by the way, again, I had to look up who Pamela Voorhees was. Shame on me. I should have known. She is, spoiler, she's your main villain in Friday the 13th Part 1. But we find that Pamela Voorhees supposedly used the Necronomicon to raise Jason back from the dead.
Yeah, they did a really good job of using this to sort of retcon the history of the characters and explain exactly how it is Jason manages to keep coming back from the dead. I think that makes everything in the Jason universe a little more plausible, that he's a result of the curse of the Necronomicon. And the whole pictorial history in the Necronomicon in the Book of the Dead, again, that plays into the Evil Dead franchise, because if you watch Evil Dead 2, as Ash and the female lead in that movie are flipping through the Necronomicon trying to figure out exactly what's going on, very quickly, and you probably don't catch it the first time you watch it, and it becomes a lot more clear after you watch Army of Darkness, but they look at a page that shows a man holding a shotgun over his head as a car falls from the sky. And it's a direct reference to Army of Darkness and how Army of Darkness opens. So that's another one of those little things that's a trademark of the Evil Dead, and what the Necronomicon does, they've used that to sort of foreshadow what's going to happen and explain what's happened in the past. It becomes their, I believe they call it a Deus Ex Machina, the ghost in the machine that allows them to explain away whatever they need to explain.
Very cool, very cool. Now, as they're sitting there reading this Necronomicon, we find out that the safe place that they supposedly had jumped into, it looks an awful lot like that house from Nightmare on Elm Street. They didn't realize it, but they were running straight into one of Freddy's creations. Because on the outside is the jump rope kids from Nightmare on Elm Street. 1, 2, yeah. Freddy's coming for you. There's a battle between the jump rope kids and Ash is able to take care of business with his boomstick and his chain lightning. And but Jason makes his way into the fray now, and he's going after Freddy. one of the cool things that I noticed in the book is how Freddie would create these nightmare escapes. There's like this dome over where, Freddie's influence is, and then on the outside of the dome is the snow-covered Crystal Lake. Well, Jason is kind of you see him kind of walk through this dome back towards the Nightmare on Elm Street house. Anyway, he's making his way back, and Carrie grabs the Necronomicon, and she's just about to say those words, Klaatu Verata, and she can't get it out. Jason grabs a book quickly from her hands. This is a very cool. In issue 5, this is some of my favorite. I sent you the picture of this, but Ash has his shotgun and proceeds to shoot him basically upwards across the face, blowing his hockey mask off and partially his face off. And the other goal that Ash is trying to do is get a hold of this book. So he proceeds to cut Jason's arm off with his chainsaw. The book falls down on the ground along with Jason's arm, and Carrie goes and grabs the book. And Jason's just standing there, as Jason does, silently just grabs his machete and proceeds to stick it in his stump of his wiggling arm there. And now, Ash, the only word that comes out of Ash's mouth is knife. And then he proceeds to berate Jason on how the fact that he's nobody's original anymore. So, that to me was one of my favorite parts, where he sticks that machete in there. But anyway, okay, so we have machete armed Jason. The final page, Ash ends up getting knocked out of the fight because Freddie's there now, Jason's there. Ash ends up getting thrown through a window of the house. And so he's kind of laying outside unconscious, and you see Freddie and Jason are about to go at it. Literally, the house freaking falls down around them while, Ash is laying outside. There's a part in the book which kind of cracked me up where I think Ash gets thrown out of the window or something like that, and Freddie says, I'm glad you're back. He looks at Jason and says, I'm glad you're back because that other guy talks too much. I'm like, this coming from a guy that does not stop talking. So, issue 5, man, I think it was a really good, intense issue. What are your thoughts, man?
Very fast-paced. It's kind of like in Freddy versus Jason, where they finally pull Freddy into the real world. You finally see Freddie and Jason lock up.
Oh, yeah.
And that's what issue 5 is here. We finally have all 3 major players together, where you can tell we are building to the crescendo here. We are quickly moving towards whatever the grand finale is going to be, because these 3 forces cannot exist in the same place at the same time for very long. We get a little more one-on-one between Jason and Ash, which we'll call it a draw. Jason loses a hockey mask, loses an arm, gains a machete. Ash gets knocked through a window, and now we see Freddie and Jason face-to-face again. And I think one of the things that hurts me most about not seeing this movie, as much as I didn't enjoy Freddie as the smart-aleck, snappy, witty, comedian-type horror figure, I do think it would be a lot of fun to see Robert Englund and Bruce Campbell go back and forth on screen.
Oh, yeah. Oh, man, that'd be classic stuff, man. One thing I can say is the fact that if you can't get it in movies, it's awesome that we have another medium out there, such as comics, to where we can see to see it happen. That there's definitely other books out there that have done something similar to this, where a movie could not get made, but we're going to, a comic will be made instead. A lot of times nowadays it's more about, the comic gets made first, and the movie, people are wanting to base the movie off of it. That is definitely one of the positives that comes out of this book, is the fact that, hey, you can't get it here, but we're going to give it to you here. And they do a damn good job, in my opinion, of telling a story here that I definitely would have loved to see it on the screen, but if I can't see it there, I love the fact that I can see it in this comic. Let me jump into issue 6, our final issue here, and I'll give you guys a synopsis and how it's all about to go down here. And Gavin, I know you got questions. You said you had some questions, so we'll definitely address those at the end. And I doubt I have answers, but by golly, let's put them out there and we'll see what's going on. Okay, our 6th and final issue. So now Carrie's still got the book. She's still got the Necronomicon, and she's still taking off. And Freddie has somehow escaped from Jason, and he starts using his power and trying to find Carrie. Carrie takes off. I think she just straight goes out onto the frozen Crystal Lake, and there's these sheds out there. It look like fishermen's sheds. And she just jumps in one and hides, and it's basically a shell game for Freddie. He's blowing things up. He's blowing these buildings up trying to find Carrie in the Necronomicon. He finally finds her, and just as, there's a sequence there where he starts jawing with Carrie back and forth, and just as he, gets the book and he's about to kill Carrie, Jason makes his return. He shows up, and he just takes his machete and just splits Freddie right down the middle of the skull. Freddie, about at this point, I don't know if you could call him with the power of a god, but by golly, he's pretty dang powerful. He pretty much just heals right up from that. He's okay, no problem. Grabs the book, and he's trying to utter those 3 words again, and right before he can finish that last one, Ash makes his way back, driving his car straight into Freddie's back. He hits Freddie. The book goes, I believe the book goes flying. Ash and Freddie are now going at it. At one point, Ash shoots Freddie right in the nuts. And, of course, Jason's coming back. We got ourselves a triple threat, folks. We got just when you think one guy's getting the other upper hand, here comes another guy. Jason comes back for Ash. Ash ends up falling through the ice of the lake, and as he comes back up, Freddie and Jason are just about ready to go. They're having the brawl to end it all. They're going to end it. Right before they can, Ash ends up shooting Jason right through the chest. Of course, this does nothing to affect Jason, but there's a phrase that he utters: "Hey, limp dicks, come get some," and that's straight up. You can't get much better than that coming out of Ashley J. Williams' mouth. But he shoots Jason. Carrie finally gets the book and says the words. She finally says the words. The great portal opens up to the Deadite dimension, sucking everything into it. If you're for our listeners out there who are familiar with the vortex that occurs in the Evil Dead Army of Darkness, as soon as it opens up, it's almost like a black hole where it starts sucking things into it. Freddie goes flying off into it easily, and so does I think the book ends up flying into it also, and he just about grabs the book and starts to read it when it gets away from him. Ash and Carrie are trying to hold on for dear life onto a tree or something so they don't go flying into it. And all the while,
Ash knows how this works.
Yeah, he's familiar. So you're sitting there thinking, well, Jason, where's Jason at? And you're thinking, well, Jason's going to be flying into it pretty soon. Jason's just standing off in the distance, like it doesn't bother him at all. No problem. You can see that they say, well, he's too strong. Well, about that time, Ash's car gets up and ends up hitting Jason in the back. Instead of them going through the abyss, like I thought they were going to, they end up actually going. Jason Voorhees ends up finding himself back in the most dreaded place ever, the bottom of Crystal Lake. So he's now in the lake. Freddie is now gone. The book is in the Deadite dimension also. Quickly, we get our fairy tale ending. Right after that, I mean, the next page is pretty much, Ash talking about how, he's happy with the way things ended. That's our second to last page for sure. Now, our last page, we see, I'm guessing the portal opens back up. Out flies the Necronomicon. Now, the Necronomicon does have a personality of its own, correct?
Yes, and it hates Ash with a passion.
It's a passion, because Ash even mentions that in here, that he feels the Necronomicon actually had a hand in bringing him to Crystal Lake. Out from the Deadite dimension comes the book. No Freddie, but out comes the book. And the book lands on top of the Crystal Lake ice, and underneath the Crystal Lake ice is a Jason Voorhees looking straight up at the book. Pages are laid open right above Jason's face. And on those pages... And here's
where my question comes in. This is my question. Because as those pages are laid open, going from right to left, we see what I assume is the outline of Jason Voorhees holding a machete with his grotesque mangled hair wisping about his head. We see a very large image of Freddie, who appears to be a part of the Necronomicon now. He looks like he's staring out from the Necronomicon. We see someone who is clearly Ashley J. Williams firing up the chainsaw and ready to do battle again. Jesse, who the hell is the other guy?
The fourth dude looks like he's it looks like he's almost holding a frying pan or a umbrella. I can't make it out. I mean, it's clearly, it's not. They definitely did not make it easy to tell who the hell that is. Do you have a theory?
I do not. And I've actually gone so far as to tweet some of the members of the creative team listed directly underneath that panel, and I've never gotten a response from them. Because to me, this indicates that in telling this story, and especially knowing that it was supposed to be a movie at one point, there was supposed to be a sequel to this, too. And it's supposed to involve whoever that guy is. I need to know who that guy's supposed to be.
Well, there is another series. Now, I didn't read it, though, but there's another series, and I know it's by the same creative team. But, again, I haven't read it. It's called Nightmare Warriors, Freddy versus Jason versus Ash. Came out in August of 2009. Same creative team, James Couric and Jason Craig. I'm looking at the Wikipedia right here. It says the story picks up where Freddy versus Jason versus Ash left off and features cameos from known characters from the previous Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street films. So
okay. I never knew that existed, so I now have something I need to track down.
I'm wondering if that's not going to be somebody from one of those, either Freddy or Jason's past. I honestly couldn't even begin to guess, but yeah, I've seen.
Well, now that you say that, I'm going to say that probably not Jason holding the machete. I'm going to say that that's probably what was the girl's name that Heather Langenkamp played in the original Nightmare on Elm Street? But I would imagine it's whoever Heather Langenkamp played. And then over there on the side, I'm sure that the jock that went to bat against Jason in maybe Friday the 13th 4, New Hope. Those are my guesses now, because I tried. I was like, what kind of umbrella is it? Doctor Who? Like what? You have no idea how long this has bugged me, and now that I know that there's a second series, I'm so excited to read it just to find out who that is. And while you're getting the information there on Nightmare on Elm Street, I will give everybody a heads up on this. If you're listening to this and you go to comic book conventions or pop culture conventions or horror conventions, and Bruce Campbell is going to be there, don't bother taking this or any other Army of Darkness book to get him to sign, because he won't do it. Because the representation of Ashley J. Williams in these comic books, he receives zero royalties from it. He receives no compensation for his likeness whatsoever. And while he's not rude necessarily to the fans that bring it, he's still very personable and still very cordial with them. He'll sign anything else that you have. He doesn't get mad that you bought the comic book or anything like that, because it's certainly not common knowledge. But he will not autograph any of the Army of Darkness comic books because he is not compensated in any way for his likeness. This series, one of the names that you'll find on the creative team is Jeff Katz. Jeff Katz is known among wrestling circles. He's tried to get a couple of different projects off the ground, and they never really came to fruition. For whatever reason, he was never completely able to follow through on his plans for them. But certainly a creative guy, and certainly somebody that has a lot to offer in different mediums of storytelling. And I didn't really know who Jeff Katz was at the time that these books were written and when I read them. But going back and looking now and seeing his name on it's kind of cool, because I know where Jeff Katz has come from and what he's done since these books came out.
Nancy, by the way, in that whole mess. It was Nancy. Yes. Okay, so you mentioned Jeff Katz. I just caught you a little bit talking about Jeff Katz. He was the guy that did the screenplay or had a treatment for the Freddy versus Jason versus Ash, right?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Very cool. Yeah, I enjoyed the series. I'll go ahead and give you my closing thoughts here on it. I got a couple questions for you there, and some of the stuff you may have already answered. But I enjoyed it. I definitely enjoyed this series. If you guys get a chance to pick it up, definitely give it a shot. I'm sitting here basically, giving you an abbreviated audiobook version of it, but I mean the visuals in this book are amazing. I think there's some stuff that, especially the killing. I hate to sound morbid, but I mean, they do a great job of showing you what you want to see if you're a horror fan. We'll put it that way. Gavin, you definitely enjoyed the series, correct?
Yeah, I've probably gone back and reread this miniseries 4 or 5 different times, which is a lot for me because I tend not to reread a lot of books, comics or otherwise, because once I know how they end, it sort of takes the enjoyment out of it for me. But this is almost, to me, it reads so much like a movie. It's like popping in a movie that I've seen before and that I'm familiar with, and it's almost like one of those comfort movies that you pop in on a rainy day when you're bored. When I'm sitting around and I want to read something, but I don't really know what I want to read, this is one of the first things I go to grab. The art in it is definitely a step up from most of the Army of Darkness stuff, because a lot of that stuff tended to be very stylized and cartoonish. They did a very good job of keeping a dose of realism in this and making it true to the subject matter that they had. So I really enjoy this. One of my favorite miniseries that I've ever read as a comic book fan.
Awesome. Well, man, let me tell you, I appreciate it 1,000% you coming on here and talking this with me.
Thank you very much for joining us. Do not forget to subscribe to our new home by punching in W2M Network on just about any podcast platform to get all of our content into your audio feed. Also, give a like to the Radulich In Broadcasting Network and W2Mnet.com Facebook page in order to stay on top of everything that we have to offer. If you'd like to follow the Source Material Podcast on social media, just follow @SourceMatCast on Twitter, and we are on Facebook @Source Material Comics Podcast. If you enjoyed what you heard, please feel free to share. We look forward to entertaining you again soon.